Welcome to today's People to People. I'm Glenn Marshall in for Micah Mater. Let's get started. The city of Chicago has elected a new mayor. Brandon Johnson will be sworn into office on May 15th. Here to talk about the challenges he faces and what the city needs from its new mayor are Charles Preston, Community Engagement Manager for nonprofit Newsroom and Justice Watch and co-host of the Hood YZ. And also Damon Williams is among many things an activist, artist, and the founder of the Let Us Breathe Collective. Fellas, welcome, welcome. So, there's a new mayor in town.
Indeed.
Let's talk about this. Were you guys excited to hear about Brandon Johnson being elected?
Yeah, I was relieved. Absolutely. I think Brandon Johnson shows a lot of promise. He is a teacher from the west side of Chicago. It was good to have a mayor from the west side of Chicago, one of my city. And so, yeah, I think his organizing background is something I would like to see in a position of this magnitude.
Gotcha. What about you, Dan?
Yeah, I think not only is, I think he's a good man, and I'm proud of the work that he's done thus far, even to get to this point. But what's really exciting for me is the base that he's connected to, right? So he didn't build a base to support a campaign. There was a base of folks organizing for liberation, for the health, wellness, and protection of local communities that made this election possible and was the support of his platform that he ran on. So it's really exciting to see that work be validated in the formal electoral space because it makes collective politics more possible, not just for our city, but for the whole country.
Gotcha. I thought it was interesting seeing a lot of the politicians that came out, not for Brandon Johnson, but for Paul Vallas.
Yeah.
What did you guys think about that?
I think it's a betrayal of pretty significant proportions. It is not too much of an exaggeration to say that the base that was supporting Paul Vallas was rooted in white supremacy and anti-blackness, and even had, really inappropriate fascist-leaning organizations that are anti-LGBTQ. And so for folks for the black community to align with that, especially in the name of representing black politics, which was shown to not be true, I think was a historical betrayal. And the fact that not only did they, take the resources to support this movement that's opposing our community, but the fact that they stood on the other side of the people who've been organizing for decades to make moments such as this possible. So it's of great significance.
I mean, but when you think about this, though, he had a lot of black supporters, politically. I mean, you had Jesse White that was supporting him and tons of other people, Bobby Rush as well as someone else. And that was an interesting thing to see instead of coming for the black man. Not saying that everybody black has to go for black, but it was just an interesting point.
Yeah, and then I think what even complicates it further is the fact that you saw Brandon Johnson win a majority of black precincts and wards, meaning that those people who came in support of Paul Vallas doesn't necessarily have a tie to the communities that they say that they represent. So I think that puts a wriggle in the and makes it a complicated narrative. So I think those leaders should turn around and start doing some self-reflection and talking to their community and engaging them around our current mayor. And also, like to Damon's point, get involved in this big solidarity around liberation and black liberation and start talking about these things such as policing and neighborhood schools and things of that nature. So, yeah, I just think it's very interesting that you have all these black leaders who support Paul Vallas, who we've known has been in charge of like CPS and black public education for so long, but what have the outcomes have been, right? And so I think Brandon Johnson was a sound option for voters.
Gotcha, but I mean, we got to be honest. Brandon has a lot of work to do here in Chicago.
Most definitely.
I mean, first we got to get a superintendent. What do you guys think that has to come from? Because as you know, Chicago is dealing with crime. The whole country is dealing with an uptick of crime. But like, getting that superintendent will start that process.
Most definitely. So I've been kind of tuning into some of those conversations around a new superintendent. And shout out to Anthony Driver. He's an organizer who's been like on top of this issue. And I think they just hosted a community forum on the west side, getting feelings from the people about who the new superintendent should be. And they're I think they're going to host one on the south side as well. But I think that's the way you go about it, is you ask the people who will be impacted the most by policing, who should a superintendent be, instead of it coming from like a top-down level approach of government or even from the police department dictating who should be the top cop of Chicago.
Gotcha. What about you? What do you think?
I want to reemphasize the importance of participatory democracy, and we have the new elected community police councils that are also going to have a say in this. So I do think it's really important that we get folks' opinion who are most impacted. But I also kind of want to challenge the premise, and that we actually need to start having conversations that decouples the conversation of violence and safety from the institution of the Chicago Police Department. Actually, I think it is proven and statistically evident that not only has that institution been extremely harmful in our communities, but it is ineffective at what it claims to be doing. And so I think it's actually a little bit of a fool's errand to be polite, to think that whatever a new superintendent will do will actually help our communities be safer and healthier. The investment in policing is actually in contradiction to that mission.
And
But to think about that, though, I mean, like Brandon has recently, even before the election, he's backed away from the idea of defunding the police. So what do we do there?
Well, I have not. You know, I do think there was political calculus because people like myself, people like Charles, people in community that made that a political demand became a character in this election, and I don't think it was worth the danger that was the potential Vallas administration to get into the semantics of that language. But I think he knows that we need new investments. And I think he has used the language of we've had an addiction on incarceration and policing, and it has not worked. It has not served our community. It is not addressing the violence. And so that response system that we invest so many resources in, actually there are better solutions that we could start to experiment with to get better outcomes.
So, President, I'll ask you, how does the administration coming in now, like, how do they handle the crime that's happening here in the city?
Yeah, I think they have to talk to residents. They have to talk to people, and they have to talk to people who've been like organizing on all fronts in terms of like just solving not just crime, but like things that lead up to crime, right? I think Chicago suffers from a lot of lack of infrastructure when it comes to like mental health. I think our schools aren't in the best shape as they could possibly be. Our libraries, there's so many things that affect a person's or individual's life before they even like make that decision to commit a crime. And I think we should focus more on those things instead of like doing what we've always been doing, which is like increasing the police budget, right? And to piggyback off of what Damon was saying earlier, you have to get these opinions from the most impacted people. So like one of the highest voting precincts in Chicago is Cook County Jail, actually. Like, we have people in jail who are voting. So I think it would be incumbent on whoever is the top cop of Chicago, or like that conversation should be placed amongst voters amongst Cook County Jail so they can weigh in. Because just because they are incarcerated doesn't mean that they aren't a part of our democracy and also have buy-in into our city politics. They have families too.
Gotcha. Real quick, let's talk about this. I want to switch it up. You know, this week we heard about Walmart shutting down 4 stores here in Chicago. And then also the situation with the Whole Foods in Inglewood shutting down. Now we have the Save-A-Lot that's coming there, and people are not happy about that.
Right.
What is this saying about the communities and like what's going on with basically dealing with the food deserts that we see?
Yeah, I think that language is important first. The food deserts, or I heard organizers intentionally use language such as food injustice or food apartheid, because desert implies that it happened on accident. And as we see by the choices of Walmart and Whole Foods and other corporations, there are intentional choices to not provide adequate nutrition on the south and west sides of Chicago. And so we need to, I think, follow the lead of organizers such as the folks in Inglewood that are naming that Save-A-Lot does not provide adequate resources for our community. And that also I think we need to start having a bigger question of, it has been proven over the last 100 years that the market or corporate power is not primarily interested in meeting the needs of our community. So when Walmart came, when Whole Foods came, they did not say we're here to increase our profit margins. They used all this language of community investment and partnership and the health of our people. But as soon as it did not match what their, share price needed, they left and vacated our community. I think we need to actually ask that question of, maybe we need new systems to provide food to our people.
And it goes to questioning what is community involvement, what is community engagement. When you see these corporations come into our communities, what does buy-in into the community actually look like, and what does that relationship look like? I think it is not it's not a communal practice to like provide a service and then abruptly leave, right? And so I think one thing we should be talking about instead of just private ownership is like co-op or like cooperative ownership, where residents of the community can own the services, grocery stores or other services within their community, and really have full-time investment inside of it instead of a private corporation coming in, parachuting into your community, exploiting it, getting whatever it wants, getting its bread, and then leaving.
That's interesting. I would like to dig deep into that and see how that would work. But let's look at the country, man. We had a crazy, interesting week when it comes to Tennessee with Representative Justin Pearson and Representative Justin Jones actually being taken away from their positions and then being reinstated in their positions. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, it's a lot. It recalls, like, I was looking at videos of like one of them speaking, and I'm like, this is like it's 1963 all over again. It's like it never left. It's like the protest, the signs, the cadence, and everything. But it shows you that there is, I would say, political war in these southern states in terms of the right-wing political electeds really trying to keep power, and the fact that they are. There was an attempt to oust two black lawmakers, Democrats, of course, but two black lawmakers shows you how steep the racism is there. And I don't believe that we're done talking about racism in this country. I believe it shows itself not only at that high level political office level, but also every day in the lives of many folks in Tennessee, Memphis, and Nashville, and all other cities. So, yeah.
Man, we're gonna keep this conversation going for another day, man, because you guys are great.